From Grangeville to Lapway, we've got your District 2 breakdown right here on the Palouse Prepcast with Garrison Hardie.
That's right. It's time for another edition of the Palouse Prepcast from IdahoSports.com, where we're talking about everything going on in District 2 athletics in the state of Idaho. I'm Brandon Bainey, back after a one-week layoff. Garrison Hardie. Garrison, how are you?
I'm doing well, Brandon. Had a great time at the conference out in Lebanon, Tennessee. Met a lot of great people out there. Listened to a lot of great speakers. Spoke with a lot of great businessmen. So it was a blast. But I'm looking forward to getting out and calling some good football this week. It's just great to be back.
Yeah, well, we definitely missed you here on the Prepcast. So last week as a fill-in, I got Prairie's head football coach, Ryan Hasselstrom, and then his son, star running back Brody Hasselstrom, and that was a lot of fun. So we had a good time. I said, Coach Hasselstrom, if Garrison's ever gone again, I've got you on retainer. And he was like, I don't know about that.
We'll hold off on that. But man, talk about a good pair of guests to have on. I mean, a lot of wins under the Hasselstrom's name with regards to Prairie, and his son's a pretty solid running back too. So no big deal there.
Yeah, he had just taken a visit to the College of Idaho to potentially play college football when we were talking to him last week. So that was kind of exciting. Real quick, I did want to talk college football just for a second. I know you're a Washington State Cougars fan.
Go Cougs.
Okay,
right, carry on.
And I've got to represent my Montana Grizzlies
after
they upset Washington in the opening week.
As a Cougars fan, yes.
I mean, it's the first time the Grizz had beaten Washington since like 1920. It had been over 100 years.
Wow.
And then Washington last week goes and just gets their doors blown off by Michigan. So you've got to be loving life, right?
This is great. Yeah. Obviously Washington State hasn't gotten off to the hottest start, losing to Utah State, but that's besides the point. We're talking about Washington right now. At least we didn't lose to an FCS school. And then, I kind of expected actually Washington to maybe have a bit of a bounce back at the Big House, maybe not win, but make it a good game. The new coach there, Chris Lake, I think it is.
Yeah.
He's got some work to do, so, Husky fans, I went on their social media just to revel in their misery. And they were calling for his job already. And so it's kind of a mess over there right now, which is just great. So thank you to your program for dispatching them for us.
Well, when they beat Washington was the 20th ranked team in the country. How they were ranked in the top 25, I'll never know. But yeah,
their recruiting class was solid. Yeah, that always seems to be the case. They're always in the top 25 when it comes to recruiting classes. So people always, assume, well, then that's gonna translate to on the field, and you think it would, but Coach Peterson did that a little bit. I like Coach Peterson even when he went over there, but they just never really. They've always just been a B+ program, I would say.
Yeah, well, I knew it had been a couple of weeks since I had seen you, and I knew I didn't know you were going to be repping your college team like I'm repping mine, but that worked out really nicely. So if you want to see our college football apparel, you can watch the video of this Prepcast on the IdahoSports.com YouTube channel, as well as our Facebook page. Or if you want the audio only, you can go to IdahoSports.com or download this podcast wherever you listen to your podcast. So, all right, let's dive into the high school scene and what's going on. I think we got to start with the Lewiston Bengals. They are 3-0 on the season. They got into the top 5 in the media poll this week, Garrison. They're now the 5th ranked team in the state, and they really had an easy time with Clarkston in a 54-13 victory. There's the high potent offense we're used to seeing from Lewiston.
Absolutely, and Jason and I have been able to call 2 of their games thus far this season, both of them at home. Except for that Clarkson game, which is the trip across the borders, but it takes them 5 minutes. So not really in a way feeling game. But talk about a great start for Lewiston. And you mentioned that high-powered offense. It's really been the return of Cruz Hepburn. And the quarterback, Jace McArcher, has done a fantastic job of orchestrating this offense and using his mobility as a way to help push this offense up the field. Their receivers have stepped up. That was a point of concern for many people just because they had lost so many receivers. Jared Jelinek, That's a name that I've called often. He's made some big plays, including a 100-plus yard interception return for a touchdown in one of the games we called. So Lewiston has some athletes, and they are scrappy on the defensive end. That defensive line has been, and offensive line rather, has been great, which, by the way, when we're talking about offense, that offensive line provides some great holes for their speedsters in the backfield to really make some moves. So, and that's why I think we're seeing such a great start from the Bengals.
Yeah, you talked about Jared Jelnick. He is a heck of a baseball player as well. If you've ever had a chance to watch him on the baseball diamond, he's outstanding. So, yeah, and he's one of those newcomers to the varsity starting lineup this year that's done such a tremendous job for Lewiston. Okay, but now I think they get a pretty tough test this week. They're going to travel all the way over to Yakima. That's a long trip for Lewiston. They're going to play Eisenhower High School. I know you know a little bit about Washington football. Do you know anything about Eisenhower as a program traditionally, or?
None at all, other than it's got a cool name. So obviously Lewiston has had the advantage of being at home these first couple of weeks here. So now they officially get to go on the road for the first time. But because they've been at home to start things off, hopefully they're going to be well rested and ready to go. Their offense has been in rhythm. They're going to have a lot of confidence going into this game. So, for me, this is a good first test, as you mentioned, but Lewiston should be firing on all cylinders.
Yeah, so the Eisenhower Cadets, they are 2-0 on the season, Garrison, a 14-12 win over Selah. Am I saying that right? Selah? I don't know. I don't know my Washington.
Selah, I think.
and then 27-7 over East Valley High School from Yakima, which is a nice win. So 2-0, and it'll be a battle of undefeated teams. So we'll see if Lewiston can continue its hot start to the season, keep up that top 5 ranking. As we move along, I think the next place we have to go is Moscow. I've had a hard time figuring out this Moscow team. Okay, they beat Grangeville in a pretty low-scoring game, and then last week they're taking on a Timberlake team that's a class below them in terms of size, right? 3A versus 4A, and they lose 19-16. And Timberlake kind of ran the ball all over them. I'm having a hard time figuring out this Moscow team.
Excuse me.
Yeah, you're fine. You're fine.
Yeah, with Moscow, we knew going into the season that they like to play vertically. That's one of the things that they actually touched on in your preview. Is they love to be able to throw the ball over the top. They have a quarterback with some experience there, receivers with experience there. Their running back has experience as well. So we knew they would have liked to play up and down the field if they could. They just ran into a Grangeville team that, they're the Bulldogs. They played like it, that's for sure. So they forced a tough defensive contest. And just because, a score may not be flashy and they have a hard time getting things going, it turns into more of a defensive grudge match. Doesn't necessarily, to me, we talk about this. You and I have talked about this past weeks. It takes the offense a little bit more time to catch up to things as far as momentum goes, getting the plays in the correct order that you want, the players in the right spots. That takes a little bit more time to get together. So I guess I'm not all that surprised to see a bit of a slow start for Moscow, but then they really take off. So for me, they're catching up at the right time here.
Yeah, so for Moscow, that tight loss to Timberlake, 19-16, that's their first loss of the season. They're 2-1. They're still doing fine. Just a little eye-opening for me, for sure. And then this week, Moscow gets ready for one of those cross-state rivalry games as they will welcome Pullman to town, the Greyhounds. Do you know much about this Pullman-Moscow rivalry series?
Just that they don't like each other. My dad, he played it for Pullman back in the BC era, whenever that was. And he essentially, when we've driven past Moscow a couple times, said, "Oh, there's those Bears." So he even remembers the rivalry and whatnot, and said, "Yeah, Pullman always had the upper hand." But again, he's biased. What do I know? So I know for a fact they don't like each other. There's always that Moscow-Idaho border rivalry. So we can certainly expect the same level of dislike and whatnot. Pullman's got a beautiful field, a beautiful facility. Moscow Did you say it was at Pullman or Moscow?
Moscow is hosting. So
okay, so Moscow has got that home field advantage working for them. They've got themselves a home field advantage as well. So for me, Moscow certainly hoping to get back on the right track. They've shown that they can play defense. There's that for them. The question is, are they going to be able to get this offense going up to speed? And boy, what a way to start if that were against Pullman.
Well, and I'll tell you that favors well for this Pullman matchup because Pullman comes in 0-2, a 34-0 shutout loss against Zilla, and then a 28-7 loss to Topping. They've scored 7 points in 2 games so far this year and 2 losses. So Moscow is a defensive team that sets up well for them. Let's talk about Grangeville next. Grangeville, we talked about, had that really close loss to Moscow in the season opener, and you thought, okay, yeah, they're looking pretty strong. No shame in losing to a 4A school as a 2A opponent. But since then, Grangeville has lost 2 in a row. Now, they've come out and put together a pretty formidable schedule. They lost to Bonners Ferry 53-0 in a game that Coach Adams, talking to the newspaper, the Lewiston Tribune, said we kind of lost our cool at the end of the game and had some unsportsmanlike conduct penalties and things that aren't what we try to teach our guys. So it sounds like, a couple things came off the rails there. And then last week they get shut out by Weiser, which is a 3A state title contender, 40-0. So through 3 games this year, they've only scored 8 points. But I think if you just look at the record 0-3, you're missing the fact that Grangeville has put together a really tough schedule, and they're a lot better than that 0-3 record indicates.
Well, Coach Adams and I'm sure the athletic director were really hoping that scheduling tougher opponents would pay off for them when it came to playoff selection time and whatnot, because as we've discussed, the selection is done a little bit differently, and it entails the other team's rankings and the way they've finished and whatnot as well on your schedule. So I'm sure they were hoping by scheduling some of these tougher opponents, the playoff selection committee would see that going forward. Obviously hasn't gone the way they wanted. And as far as some of the guys getting unsportsmanlike penalties towards the end of that game, you hate to say it, but it's a little understandable. I mean, when a situation like that, it's demoralizing. It's tough to swallow. All the Grangeville program has pride. So to be shut out in that fashion, excuse me again.
That's all right. Go ahead. You just take a second. Garrison is coming off of a little bit of a cold. It seems like everybody was sick this week at Idaho Sports. Will Henneke was not feeling well. I was having a hard time talking a couple days ago. So we've all just passed it around to each other, I guess.
I guess so, yeah. And to be fair, I was around over 1,000 people at a conference, and so could have been something from there. But I'm feeling much better. It's not COVID. Just had a day where I was out with maybe the man flu, as they call it, and then I been back and feeling better. It's just this leftover stuff that loves to settle here and makes it hard to talk. But in any case. So when you have 2 back-to-back losses like that, I myself as a former player, we've all been through it. And I really think that's why football is one of the great builder up. I guess it really builds up strong men going forward. So to have to go through such tough losses that they've gone through early on, and just if they're able to dust themselves off and move forward, they're going to be able to look back and say, man, what a bunch of great lessons we learned from those games, and they should be able to use that to their advantage as they go forward in the season. They still got some time left. They still have a decent amount of their schedule left. So if they're able to turn themselves around here, having gone against such tough competition, I really see that as boding well for them.
Yeah, as I look at their schedule, it doesn't get any easier this week. They're hosting McCall Donnelly, a 3A program. They're only 2-0, by the way. The week after that, they host Kellogg. Well, they're 3-0. They're undefeated. And then they wrap up the season with a home game against Melba, which is expected to win their conference in the District 3 in the 2A ranks as well. So you're talking about, they're putting all their eggs in that conference basket, right? The only games they have to win are St. Mary's and Orofino. They'll play those 2 teams in back-to-back weeks in October. And, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I could easily see Grangeville winning the league with a 2-6 overall record, everybody taking them for granted when the playoffs roll around. not factoring in the rigorous schedule that they played. And I could see Grangeville making a deep run despite that 2-6 record, because they're the only 2A opponents they're playing are St. Mary's, Orofino in their conference, and then Melba at the end of the year. And that's another really solid 2A team. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy times all the way around, with COVID last year and kind of leaking into this year. We talked about for Grangeville, Orofino, and St. Mary's, none of them really got to play any football last year, maybe a couple of games. So they're they're a little inexperienced, I guess you could say, coming off of that. So, it's weird times all around. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if that did play out. Grangeville has winning mentality at this program. So if they're able to win their league and then go into the playoffs, and like you said, people underestimate them just because they see maybe more losses than they have in the past, who's to say? And that's why these games aren't played on paper. Jason and I have commented on that numerous times already. So who's to say?
Yeah, for sure. It's really odd to see all three teams in the Central Idaho League. They're all winless. Grangeville is 0-3. St. Mary's is 0-3. Orofino is 0-2. It's very unusual this far into the season to see that, but they're all playing such incredibly difficult schedules because of what happened last year. So,
right.
White Pine League. Let's stop by the White Pine League, and man, the most entertaining league in football. Every game is high scoring, and that was the case again last week. As you look at the scoreboard, Genesee over Potlatch 62-36. Lapway shuts out Troy 58-0. Kamei gets past Logos 50-6. Prairie defeats Clearwater Valley 48-14. So the way the conference is setting up right now, Genesee is 2-0 in the league. They're also 2-0 overall. They haven't played any non-conference games. Prairie is 1-0. Kamei is 1-0. Clearwater Valley is 0-1 in the league and 0-2 overall, but they've played Raft River and Prairie, probably two of the three best teams in 1A D1. So it's kind of settling in, kind of like we thought coming into the season, right? Where you've got those teams at the top like Prairie and Genesee and Lapway and Kamei, and I would throw Clearwater Valley in there as well. CB's 0-2, but they've had a really tough schedule so far. I think it's gonna be a lot of fun to watch these teams. There's Prairie, and then I think there's everybody else. It's gonna be fun to watch those other four teams duke it out.
100%. And, I look at a team like Genesee, who last year had all the makings of challenging for a title, but COVID cut it short. They had a lot of COVID within their program, so they had to essentially shut it down 4 games into the season. And that was obviously the case for a lot of programs across the country. But for as far as the White Pine goes, I thought Genesee could have very well been a challenger in the White Pine last year. And now we're seeing that carryover effect into this year to where they're looking like a really solid team. And obviously it's just a couple of games into the season, but they're showing that they mean business. They got those reinforcements from Colton just over the border into Washington, who, because of restrictions, they haven't been able to really do much of anything. So they just came over to Genesee, and those reinforcements, especially in 8-man football, are crucial just because sometimes injuries happen, and it's just nice to have extra bodies. So look out for Genesee. Lapway, they've kind of surprised us. You and I were talking earlier before the season even started about they lost a lot of experience from years past. Well, Titus Year out, he's been a stud. That he's incredibly mobile at his position. So look out for them. And they just always have talented athletes all over the field. And for them to compete against that, what was it, Oakley early in the season?
Yeah, Oakley.
Yeah, for them to compete like they did against Oakley, who, by the way, won it all last season, that was impressive in its own right. And then, as you said, with Prairie, they're always up there. We know that. They've kind of established an empire, so to speak. But then with Clearwater, even though it's been a slow start for them, I don't take too much into consideration for that because there's still a lot of leveling out that we're going to see throughout this conference. A lot of pieces are going to fall into place, and I think they're going to get their fair share of wins when all is said and done. So, like you said, it's going to be interesting to see how this top 4, I guess you could say, levels out as we get closer to playoff time and as they start running into each other more often in some of these matchups. So obviously Prairie, I would probably put them as the favorite, but I look forward to seeing when they play some of those other top flight teams in the conference.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun for sure. Titus, you're out. You mentioned he did recently commit to the University of Idaho to play basketball, which is so awesome for a kid from Lapway to go play D1 basketball is fantastic. I think he's probably the best athlete at quarterback in the league, but I think the best overall quarterback is actually Angus Jordan from Genesee. I've been really impressed with the way he's delivered the football in the passing game for Genesee in their 2-0 start. So Angus Jordan is a guy to keep an eye on for Genesee as they move along. If we look at the schedule this week, it's actually a pretty good slate of games. You've got Clearwater Valley, 0-2, trying to rebound. Well, it doesn't get any easier, Garrison. They host Genesee. So, they might be staring down the barrel of an 0-3 start, but I mean, I think they're still going to be okay. It's just a really, really tough schedule to start things off. You've got a pair of 1-0 teams in league play, Kamei at Lapway. That's going to be a de facto elimination knockout type game to see who can finish ahead of each other. I think Kamei and Lapway are pretty evenly matched. And then Prairie hosts Logos in the other conference game. There is a non-conference game, and that's actually going to be a game that you're going to be at, Garrison, as Potlatch travels to Deary in a D1 versus D2 matchup. You and Jason Hansen will have the call of that Friday night at 7:00 on IdahoSports.com.
And I'm excited about that call. Last time we went to Deary, first of all, again, you and I have talked about the scenery of District 2 quite a bit. I think we've got some of the best scenery in all of Idaho when it comes to football stadiums. So just take note of that, people. But for Deary, they've got to be right up there. I mean, you've got the mountains right in the background of the stadium from where we can see it from the press box. They're all kind of closely packed in around the field. And then the whole town really does show up and cheer on their team. The last time we were out there, the Mustangs were taking on the Kendrick Tigers. Both of them were undefeated at the time as well, if I remember that correctly. And it was quite the game, and Kendrick would ultimately come out on top. But nonetheless, they've got a great atmosphere. The whole town really pulls for Deary. So Potlatch, they've got to come ready to go. Both kind of logger towns, so to speak. So let's see if the loggers can make Deary their town for that night.
Yeah, for sure. You did mention Kendrick. They are off this week, but last week they did a neutral site game. They went to Parma. It's kind of like college football. They traveled to Parma to play Oakley in a non-conference neutral site game, D1 versus D2. Now they were shut out 52-0. And if you just looked at the final score, okay, yeah, Kendrick was overmatched. And are they really a top 5 team in D2? Yes, I still think they are. But it was only 16-0 at halftime. And even midway through the third quarter, it was still a fairly close competitive game. And then it was kind of in the fourth quarter when Oakley, just their depth and talent took over, I think. So Kendrick, I don't think there's much to be discouraged by. Yeah, 52-0 loss doesn't look great, but they're 2-1. They're still doing fine. They're still the favorites up there in District 2 for D2 football. And I think they're still a sleeper team that can make a really deep run in the playoffs.
Well, as you were describing the game against Oakley, I was just going to comment on how the end Oakley likely had way more depth, and that really does pay dividends when it comes to finishing off games or just adding to your lead and whatnot. And, Kendrick likely ran out of steam, which is completely understandable after going against a team like Oakley for so long and battling them very well, might I add. So for them to go toe-to-toe with them for as long as they did, admirable, especially for the numbers that they had. Now, of course, that's not to say that a team with less numbers can't beat bigger teams. That's certainly not the case. It's just that Oakley's incredibly talented in their own right. So that's just an extra disadvantage to go up against them for Kendrick. So Kendrick, nothing to be discouraged about. Pick up, dust off, learn what you can learn about that game and move on to the next one. They've still got a bright future in this season. And they're certainly going to be a force to be reckoned with down the road.
Yeah, so it'll be a lot of fun. They get a week off to kind of heal from their wounds, and then they'll get back into action next week. So that's kind of the football rundown, Garrison. I did want to give a special shout out real quick to a couple of volleyball teams up in the White Pine League, because it's been really impressive. The Troy Trojans and Potlatch. Those two teams have been pretty consistently ranked 1 and 2 in the 1A D1 volleyball coaches poll thus far. And it just so happens those two teams are going to play 4 nights from now. They're going to meet up on Monday night, a little Monday night volleyball. How about that at Potlatch? Troy will travel to Potlatch in a game that could determine who is going to be in the driver's seat in that White Pine League. We know Troy has such good talent. Morgan Blazard is a great outside hitter. She recently committed to Eastern Washington to play volleyball, which is super exciting from a small community like Troy. Potlatch comes in with a 9-2 record. Troy is 8-3, and I think it's so awesome that the White Pine League is being so well represented in volleyball, not just in the district, but on a statewide level also.
Absolutely. I followed that Troy versus Genesee volleyball game a little bit, just because Genesee is always right there when it comes to volleyball. They're probably a step just behind Troy, and I know a lot of Genesee fans are going to hate that I said that, just because they've kind of got that rivalry going on there. But as you said, Morgan Blazard, what an athlete. Not surprised at all to hear she's going on to the next level. I've seen her on the basketball side of things. She's not as natural when it comes to basketball, but her athleticism still really comes through in on the defensive end, and just that natural instinct overall. So to have this high scale of a matchup, I haven't really gotten to see Potlatch play, but 9-2, 8-3, that speaks for itself. So stay tuned, folks, this Monday night. What a really cool matchup we get to see. Monday night volleyball, as you said. So stay tuned and keep an eye out for the score on that one. A couple of very athletic and talented teams going at it there.
Yeah, well, so we'll talk more about that match on next week's episode of the Palouse Prepcast, and of course, all the football action as well, because it's another good slate of games as finally White Pine League is starting to get into conference play. Lewiston, of course, still in the non-conference portion, as is Moscow. But man, I can't believe we're already on week 4 already, Garrison. I can't even wrap my head around that.
Oh, I was just talking to some coworkers here. Just how much time has flown. Next thing you know, we're going to be talking about October. We're just 2 weeks away. So this has got to be my favorite time of year. Is the weather's getting cooler, which for a ginger is fantastic. And football is abound. High school sports are just moving it in general. This is a great time of year, and I look forward to being able to call more games here with IdahoSports.com.
Yeah. So again, Friday night in Deary, they will host Potlatch, and you can catch that game on IdahoSports.com with Garrison Hardie and Jason Hansen. All right, that'll do it for this edition.
If I can interject really quickly, yes. Jason is going to be out again here in the next couple of weeks for the Lewiston Post Falls game, I believe. I've got my dad roped in to take his spot, so it's going to be a Hardie Boys special. And I'm also going to see if I could get my brother, Dawson Hardie, to join in on that broadcast as well. It would really be the Hardie Boys right there, and then we'd try to hunt down Nancy Drew, but we'll stay tuned on that.
A little 3-man booth. I like it. You know, you guys are going to have to, the bar was set pretty high. Peyton Manning and Eli Manning did a special Manning Brothers broadcast of Monday Night Football earlier this week on ESPN. I don't know if you saw that or heard about that, but it went really well, actually. So
no, it was fantastic to see their insight and whatnot. And, I don't know if Dawson and I could compare on that level, but Dawson does like to think of himself as a fantasy football expert. So maybe he could bring that to the table.
All right. Well, we'll see if the Hardies can stand up to the Mannings in a couple of weeks. But for this week, Deary hosting Potlatch, and that should be a lot of fun. So thanks for tuning into this edition of the Palouse Prepcast on IdahoSports.com. For Garrison Hardie, I'm Brandon Baney. Enjoy the games this weekend, everybody, and we'll see you back here next week on IdahoSports.com.